Hello and welcome back to Small Talk. We've got a great episode for you today as we check in with a pair of national champions from Eastern Connecticut State. I'm your host, Katie Mucci. Each week on this show, we highlight the past and present of Division III, with both current and former student athletes joining to talk about their experiences, their favorite on-campus spots, the craziest road trip stories, and more. This week, we've got Eastern Connecticut State senior outfielder Jason Claiborn and former pitcher Joe Serfass. The two discuss how to stretch your daily per diem, some national championship memories, why they chose Division III, and more. Thanks for joining this week. Now it's time for some small talk.
Hi, my name is Joe Serfass, and I'm a proud 2004 graduate of Eastern Connecticut State University, where I was also a member of the baseball program. And I am currently a physical education teacher and head baseball coach at Windsor High School in Windsor, Connecticut.
Hi, I'm Jason Claiborn. I'm a rising senior on the Eastern baseball team currently, also a member of the 2022 National Championship team. And I have one more year left as an Eastern Warrior.
No big deal, just a national champion.
I love
Awesome.
throwing it in there whenever I can.
That's fair. I would also throw that in every introduction I do. All right, so for you two, we're going to start out first talking about on campus. And so, as I mentioned, we're going to see what similarities and differences there are. So I'll start out with you, Jason. What are maybe the best spots that you and your teammates and maybe other athletes that are hanging out at, restaurants, places on campus, things like that? And then Joe, we'll see if any of those have changed or if any of those are the same places you guys were hanging out.
Okay, I actually like that question. That's a good one. For on campus, definitely a spot that everyone hangs out is the student center, the stew, everyone calls it. Basically, like every day at some point you walk through the stew, you're going to see a bunch of athletes, specifically baseball players, all sitting in a circle, hanging out in between classes, trying to kill time, stuff like that. It's good to just get the guys together on campus and be a part of the community at school. For off campus, there's a few spots. Blarney's Restaurant and Pub is a popular one. Willie Brew is a popular restaurant. There's a few places up at stores that people like to go to, like Insomnia Cookie. That's a popular late night snack spot. Those are the main three that I could think of off the top of my head.
You know, the Student Center has recently been renovated and upgraded since I graduated. So we didn't spend as much time in the Student Center. I would say the most popular spot when I was there in between 99 and 2004 for myself and my teammates was the Sports Center, whether it was hanging out in Coach Holowati's office or hanging out in the equipment room or getting our workouts in the weight room. We also played a ton of racquetball during my time. We tried to find some different activities to do to compete with ourselves and our teammates. So I would say the Sports Center was definitely the most popular place that we hung out. You know, whether it's the locker room or the other areas in the Sports Center that I mentioned. Off campus, Blarney's is still a hot spot. It was back when I was there and even before my time, I know that. And like Jason said, with UConn about 10 minutes down the road, it was nice to be able to venture into Mansfield and Stores and hit up some restaurants and some different areas that way as well.
I thought it was interesting that you mentioned that you guys would use the racquetball courts because we never really get to use them. It's kind of more used as like a place where you stretch before you go over to the weight room nowadays. But I've always wanted to and wished we could incorporate them into like workouts somehow. I feel like it would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we had my best friend at school. We would go at it on a weekly basis. Really fantastic workout and just a great, again, a good spot to kind of hang out and spend some downtime and, connect with your teammates and compete in different areas, which was a lot of fun for us.
Sounds like when you guys have that alumni game at the beginning of the season, maybe you also need a racquetball tournament thrown in there.
That would be awesome.
It's a good workout too.
Now off campus, you're traveling for games, and I don't know how far you guys travel typically, but obviously with baseball, you have some 3-game series to work on. So when you're traveling, is it usually by bus? Do you get a van or a few 15-passenger vans? Do you guys get to fly anywhere? Joe, I'll have you start out and just talk about how you all were traveling. And then also, were you putting 4 or 5 in a room on those trips, or were you getting a couple and you had your own bed? What's the travel like?
Yeah, so for our in-conference games or local games, we would actually take vans to most games. We would pile into whatever it was, 2, 3, maybe 4 vans to get to our conference games or local out-of-conference games. Sometimes we would, have the privilege of hopping on a bus, but for the most part, it was taking the vans. We always traveled to California for our spring trip in March. Obviously, that was on a plane. And then to the World Series in the early 2000s, I had the privilege of being part of a team that went to 3 consecutive World Series. So that was out in Appleton, Wisconsin, and we would hop on a plane for that. One thing I do want to highlight is after my junior year that summer, our Eastern team was selected to go overseas to the Netherlands to represent U.S. And we played in the World Port Tournament against some of the junior national teams, the Cuban team, the Taiwan team, South Africa. So of course, being that was overseas, we hopped on a plane for that. But again, for most of the part during my 4 years there as a member of the baseball program, most of our games were within driving distance. So we would hop in those really, really tight vans that our coaches would have to drive.
That's actually pretty interesting that you guys got to fly overseas and play some games. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to do anything like that. As far as traveling to conference games and pretty much every game, we are lucky enough where we do get coach buses now. There's now an Eastern coach bus that actually has like a picture of us from the 2022 team on it celebrating, and a bunch of other sports teams like right as like a watermark on the side of the bus, which is pretty cool that we get to ride in that. The only times we really take vans are sometimes on our like spring break trip. Like this past year, we went down to Virginia and then to Myrtle. And while we were in Florida the year before that, we took vans driving around from place to place. It was definitely a little compact in there from like what we're used to. We're, like I said, a little spoiled with the coach buses now, but it was a good time. It brought team chemistry, just everyone being close, like in smaller groups, just being able to talk. And it was a different dynamic than what we were used to, which was a lot of fun. We also had a few plane flights like you guys. We flew to Iowa for the World Series, and we also flew down to Fort Myers my sophomore year for spring break. But most of the time, we're just in coach buses going from place to place, game to game.
So I see they've obviously upgraded. We never had a picture of ourselves on the bus the year after we won the national championship. So I'm glad Eastern is rewarding those teams with some graphic designs on their transportation.
It was actually really cool. I remember even I was completely surprised that Eastern went and did something as cool as that. But it's really cool, like riding in the bus and like knowing that your face is kind of just like on the side of it as you drive.
That's awesome. That's big time.
That's awesome. So one trend I've had on this podcast so far in the last 2 or 3 interviews is everyone who travels in vans has had their fair share of breakdowns or funny stories from that. Either of you in the few trips you've had, Jason, or the many trips you had, Joe, any van stories where that maybe didn't go smooth?
I could be wrong, but I think I recall a couple breakdowns. I think one was on the way to the airport, on our way, for our West Coast trip out to California. I think one of the vans got a flat tire, and I think we were a little nervous getting to the airport that we were going to make it in time. But for the most part, the Eastern Connecticut vans held up pretty sturdy throughout my time.
I've been lucky where, knock on wood, I still got a year left, but none have really broken down on me. We've definitely had a few bus drivers that accidentally took wrong turns that made us super late for games. And we ended up having to like quickly like rush and get ready. And those moments are always fun to look back on and laugh about. Like I said, mentioned earlier, being in those vans, it was a different type of dynamic when everyone's just squished together close and has nothing to talk about for hours. So nothing in particular, but just the conversations and memories in those vans I know I'll cherish for a while.
That's awesome. Yeah. So when you're in the middle of getting lost, did you know you guys were getting lost, or was it just kind of like, hey, aren't we playing in half an hour?
It was honestly more of something that my coaches would deal with, but it was kind of just like we'd figure out that after like 30 minutes of driving in the wrong direction, we were going in the wrong direction the whole time. Then the bus driver and my coach would have to figure out the best way to map getting to there on time, and that only happened one or two times, but it was funny to look back on nevertheless.
So what was the food like, Joe, for you? Were you guys eating nice meals, or were you hitting up the McDonald's for your road trip meals?
From what I recall, I believe we got $20 for meal money. I want to say it was $20 for each day. So to answer your question, there wasn't a whole lot you can get for $20 at a nice restaurant. So yes, fast food restaurants were, usually the hit, and the place that all the guys went to. Kind of a funny, quick little short story. I actually had a really bad superstition. I was a pitcher, and the night before every one of my starts, I had to eat surf and turf. It kind of started my freshman year, and I had a fairly good record on the mound throughout my career, and it kind of just stuck with me. So I had to find ways to get my surf and turf within reason when it came to cost. That's why Ruby Tuesdays off the campus, it's not there anymore, I don't think, but over in the Mansfield area was my favorite spot. But yeah, to answer your question, Katie, there was a lot of fast food restaurants visited due to $20 a day for meal money.
How about you, Jason?
So for me, it was actually a little different. So a lot of the time, instead of giving us money, they would try to like cater meals to us. And the most common meal that you could ask anybody on my team, they'll tell you the same thing. I will never eat a Big Y sandwich outside of Eastern baseball in my life. I have had so many Big Y subs in my 3 years so far, and I'm going to have more of, like, no offense to Big Y, but like dry Big Y subs that I am so sick of the taste. It's honestly like muscle memory eating them at this point. But in this past year, we actually switched it up a little bit. We got Gansett wraps over at UConn catered to us a few times. And when we were in the playoff run, like a few years back, we also got Apollo catered to us, which was good, a good change of pace with some pasta and chicken. So towards playoff time and even a few times during this season, we actually got to eat pretty good. But one more thing I'd want to add is I like how you mentioned like how you'd go to Ruby Tuesdays or like places that you can get stuff for kind of cheap, because we reap the benefits of the McDonald's dollar menu a lot of the time when we got to pay for like meals out of our own pocket. And all those apps, we'll use the apps to try to get points and get like $5, $6 meals from those places. So we're also trying to budget the best we could as well.
So yeah, times have definitely changed, because I recall in the middle of double headers, Mrs. Howlawati would be making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in that little cubby area next to the dugout for in between games for all the players. And then after the game, I recalled Coach Howlawati behind the grill. We would grill out over in kind of like the hill area on the right field side. We definitely did not get any catering services for sure. So
yeah,
things have changed.
That kind of puts it into perspective for me, I guess. I guess next time I get a Big Y sandwich, I should be a little more appreciative of it.
That's great. Now let's talk about academics, the student and student athlete. Jason, starting with you, what is your major? And then Joe, also, what's your major? And then if there is any overlap or similarities there, maybe are there any professors that have been around for both of you, or classes you both took that you thought were interesting? So Jason, how do you start out?
So I'm a business administration major with a minor in communications. So for business, the way like my whole schooling has worked, I guess, is like I took a lot of core classes my freshman year. Then I got more recent years been put through all the business like heavy classes. micro, macroeconomics, those, some finance classes, principles of accounting, all stuff like that. I've had a few teachers that I've really, really liked. One being was actually for a lab. He wasn't even a business teacher. Professor Carlson, he was my lab teacher. I really liked him. Great guy. Also, Professor Hightower, he taught me accounting. Those two were just guys that I really stood out to me. Honestly, I've had some good experiences with a lot of good teachers at Eastern who have helped me out, and I still have like good relationships with. Um, I honestly don't have much to say that's bad about it. It's been good.
Well, I was many moons back and many years ago, I was a PE major with a minor in sports management. And like Jason said, I have nothing but good things to say about all my professors during my time at Eastern. They were all extremely helpful. I think the teachers at Eastern know how much of a commitment it is to be a member of the Eastern Connecticut State University baseball team, and the hours that we put in, not just us, but all the student athletes. And all the professors were very willing to work with the student athletes. I think that's one of the benefits of a Division III school, kind of a smaller scale, a little more of a connection. But the one teacher that made, I should say professor, that made a huge difference in my outlook on things, especially as a up and coming PE teacher, was Dr. Switchenko. I believe he is still there, but Dr. Switchenko was well known in the PE department. He taught 3 of the hardest classes in the PE major route. He taught anatomy, kinesiology, and physiology. And we as PE people and majors always tell other people that the toughest part about being a PE teacher is actually becoming a PE teacher. People don't realize how hard the classes are that you have to take. But he was fantastic in all ways. I remember him coming in at 8 o'clock in the morning for Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 a.m. class. And he would open up the door and we were all sitting there because we were scared to be late. So we were there for about 15, 30 minutes. And he would open up the door and he would run up to the front part of the room and he would say, "It's a great day to be alive, ladies and gentlemen." And he would jump on the desk some mornings. So just extremely motivating and made a huge impact on me personally, becoming a PE teacher. But again, really good experience academic wise at Eastern Connecticut State University.
I've never had Professor Switchenko, but I've heard a lot of good things about him. A lot of my teammates have mentioned him, some funny stories and stuff like that, and said all good things about him. So I'm not surprised you mentioned him.
Yeah, he was fantastic.
Jumping on the desk, that's always a good way to start a class.
I'm telling you, I don't know how old he's got to be. I'm not going to say it online here, but he was not young. But he was in the sports center each and every day, on the treadmill, on the elliptical, kept himself in shape. And that man had a ton of energy for his age. And, as a teacher, it's all about connecting with the kids and motivating them. And he did an unbelievable job in that area.
That's great. Now we'll have you guys look at your time on the team and share maybe the funniest or the craziest, but appropriate of story that you have with your teammates. So Joe, I'll let you go first.
Oh, well, I obviously have a ton of stories. I was actually in the program for 5 years because I redshirted my freshman year due to arm surgery. So I have many, many stories I can tell. But the one that sticks out, the most was the year we won the national championship in 2002. We actually went 0-2 in the conference tournament. And Coach Halwadi thought our season was over. He did not think we were going to get an at-large bid. And I recall being behind the third base dugout, which is our home dugout. And he was giving us a speech that was a little more of a negative, kind of the end of the season type speech that a coach would give. And his middle son, Jared, was a senior on that team. He was a captain, and he stood up and pretty much told his dad to stop talking. And he said, "We're not done yet. We're going to get into the tournament. and not only are we going to make a run, but we're going to win the national championship. And we were all kind of like looking at him like this, our senior captain's, somewhat crazy here. His dad just told us pretty much our season's over. But hey, let's go with it. And we waited until I think it was the next day, as Jason knows, when they do the seedings and the pairings, and our name was called. So that was just one memory that really stuck out. Was going from thinking our season was over to getting a second chance and then running with that opportunity. And I'll never forget, Coach Holloway during that moment and his son Jared kind of taking over and saying, nope, this is not it. We're not done.
It's funny that you mentioned like a story involving like your run to the national championship and things like that, because my story that I'm about to tell has a bunch of parallels to that. My freshman year, we were, I think, 15 in the country. Southern Maine was 13. We got upset. In my opinion, it was an upset. Walked off on our home field, and that was the end of my freshman season. So going into my sophomore year, a lot of guys like essentially put their lives on hold to ride out this one last year of eligibility and one last chance to win it. So there was a lot of like doubt about us going into the year. We obviously ended up having a great year, filled with a bunch of like pregame rituals, which is another part of my favorite memories. There was these like after every win, we had like a win song we'd all go crazy in the locker room dancing to. Really brought the guys together. But another parallel to your story, Tommy Benincasa, one of our pitchers on our national championship team, was in an interview post game in I think either the regional or our super regional, and he was asked the question like, what do you think this team has, what it takes to like win the national championship and get there? And then he instantly cut the interviewer off midway through and said, we can and we will. And then just being able to for him to be able to get the last out in the national championship after making that claim was awesome. We also had two of our seniors, that Luke Broadhurst and John Masagno, right in like our beginning of the year, like, what was your favorite part about Eastern? Like at the beginning of the season, they wrote winning the national championship this year. It was out on the website. Like if you looked at their bios the whole year, and for them to be able to back up their word, for everybody to go all in on this opportunity. A lot of guys, it was their last year of eligibility, just a one last ride thing. I could talk about this for hours, but it was just a really, really magical experience for all of that to work out exactly how we set it out to do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Confidence is obviously huge amongst the team, and everyone kind of feeds off of each other. And I think, that moment where Jared Holloway stood up, you can kind of see everyone's kind of mentality just changed, even though we thought he was crazy. But everyone was on board, just like you said, all in. And that's what you need to make a run and win a national championship, because it's so hard. I've been fortunate enough to win a state championship as a coach in high school baseball, and you need a lot of things to go your way. But if there's ever any doubt throughout that run, it's over. So that confidence piece is huge. And that's an awesome story to hear, that those guys who I knew were huge impact players for you guys. I followed you guys closely throughout the run. But leaders need to lead in order to win a national championship. So that's great.
For sure. And your story, like just kind of thinking about it, kind of got me excited. I could picture like everybody in that room kind of down in the dumps, and like one guy just leading you guys and getting you guys going. And for that to be like kind of like your villain arc part of the story, where it's like kind of turned everything around, is really cool that you guys ended up doing what you did after that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great memory for sure.
That's really cool. I didn't even need to step in there. You guys had this covered, but that's a really cool story, and I love to hear that. And maybe you need to be putting that in your roster bio this year, Jason, and see if you can close it out with the national championship in June.
It's gonna be fun. I think we could do it. Got to do everything to get back there.
All right. Well, I'll be watching. So those are kind of maybe that was your favorite memory, but are there any just funny stories too of times on the team or funny things that your team's done or teammates have done? Jason, you can go first.
So I touched upon it in my story before, but we had this like post game like song, and the post game song would change like from year to year, but there were a few songs that just like lasted like a while. It was just crazy songs that would get everybody in the dugout going, or everyone in the locker room going post win. It was like our thing to like get in the locker room after a win and all, like kind of have a dance party in the locker room, celebrating, getting all happy, especially after big wins. That we kind of formed a tradition for at least the past few years of always having like a win song and like post game in the locker room celebrations. So I hope we could keep that going. I know we'll be keeping it going for this year. Hopefully it continues after my time at Eastern's over.
Yeah, I think going back to our previous stories and memories, again, we can talk for hours about, especially the championship year runs and what happened and the different stories. But I think a funny story, one story that I kind of remember with my teammates was being on our West Coast trip. And I think it was at nighttime in the hotel. And I think we had our whole team in the hotel room at the Embassy Suites in West Covina, California. And we, Jason can attest to it. You always have some characters on the team, some funny guys. And we had probably our 4 funniest guys around the table. I think we were playing cards, and somehow it turned into each guy taking on the role of one of our coaches and imitating that coach in a funny way, an appropriate way. But it was probably one of the funniest things I've ever experienced in my life as being part of a sports team, was having our whole team in this one hotel room and these 4 guys sitting around the table playing cards and mimicking and acting like one of the 4 coaches on our staff. So again, it's funny, the little things that you remember. Again, this is 20 something years ago. But the bond that you create with your teammates is by far, the greatest memory. I had the honor and privilege to be on the mound in the national championship game and pitched a complete game shutout, which was all fantastic and great. But I always tell people the one thing I remember the most, I don't remember one pitch I threw in that game. But what I do remember is, after the last out was made on a 6-4 fielder's choice, looking in the dugout and seeing the guys running out to the mound was the one thing visually that I remember more than any pitch I made in that game. So just the bond and the memories, being part of a team and those memories you create together is definitely something we as athletes remember forever. And I tell my current players that now, individual success is great, but you will remember team success way longer than individual success.
I honestly think you said that perfectly. I couldn't agree more. Just like with what we were able to do as a team is great, but the thing that made it even more special is the guys I was able to go to war with every day. The fact that not only did we like set these goals, we were able to achieve them together was huge. And I know I have a bunch of lifelong friends that 10, 15 years down the road, like we're going to be texting each other and say, "What's up, champ? What's up, champ?" Like we're always doing stuff like that. And these are lifelong bonds, and nobody's ever going to be able to take those away from us outside of the game of baseball.
Absolutely. And, being a coach now, one thing that I think goes sometimes unnoticed and forgotten is, on the baseball field, there's only, 9 guys playing, maybe 10 with the DH, but, the role players, and Jason can attest to it, how important the role players are on a championship team. I tell my team now and my players, we're going to be as good as those role players are and buying into the system. And, a big reason, and I had an interview not too long ago and I commented on it. The big reason why teams win championships, especially our 2002 team, and I'm sure it's probably the same with the 2022 team, is everybody was all in, including those role guys, and they understood their role and they came to work each and every day and supported the guys that were on the field, and they produced when their number was called. So I always like to give a shout out to those role players within those those championship teams, because it's not easy to do.
I agree. Me too. And once again, I couldn't agree more with what you said. We had a bunch of guys on that team who some guys maybe didn't even see the field in the World Series, or we actually had to, unfortunately, not bring everybody to the World Series because we could only bring a certain number. I felt guys that were left out of getting rings that should have gotten rings along with the team as well. And I agree with you, that can't go unnoticed, like unsung heroes of the team and stuff like that. Morale guys who are showing up every day, just happy to be there, can't go unnoticed. And I would like to shout out those guys as well too.
Yeah, I don't know if either of you guys saw this year at the national championship, Lynchburg, who won this year. They had some of their players out in the crowd, painted and dressed for everything. And I know that was a huge part of their run to the national championship was those guys' support.
That's fantastic.
Let's just talk about Division III. So we're going to zoom out a little bit. You guys were D3 student athletes. Maybe talk about what being a D3 student athlete meant to you, but also how that maybe affected what you were able to do, whether it was clubs, organizations, groups you're in on campus, things like that. So, Joe, I'll start with you. Just talk about what it means to have been a D3 student athlete.
Yeah, I think being a D3 athlete for me was fantastic in so many ways. Number one, we're a student athlete, student first. So for me, it was definitely much easier to manage academics. If you're a Division I or Division II athlete, everything's kind of on a bigger scale when it comes to travel and just everything that goes along with being a D1 or D2 athlete. So I think it was definitely easier to manage when it came to academics. I mentioned it earlier. You kind of have an easier opportunity to have a better relationship with the professors. They kind of know who you are. I think D3 is good in so many ways because again it's a smaller scale, but it's still very competitive, especially with Eastern baseball. I had the opportunity to play Division I, but I chose last minute to come to Eastern, and it was by far the best move for me because it met my needs. Again, especially being a student athlete and what I needed academically. But I think D3, people don't realize how good D3 sports are. When a kid that I'm currently coaching says, I think I can play D3. Well, my first question is, have you ever been to a D3 game? So how do you know that? Because it's so competitive. There's a lot of D3 athletes that probably could have played D1 or D2. And again, nothing against D1 and D2 athletes because they're D1 and D2 athletes for a reason. They're extremely athletic. But I think there's something to be said about D3 being that there's no money involved, right? So there's no scholarship money. So you have to truly earn, making the team and then earn your playing time. Yes, you can be recruited and yes, coaches can guarantee roster spots, but at the end of the day, you have to earn that time and making that team. So I think you definitely learn some different things as a D3 athlete compared to D1 and D2. Again, nothing against those athletes, but it's different. So being a D3 athlete was very special for me. It was an amazing opportunity and definitely allowed me to get where I am now. If I went D1, I don't know if I would have had the opportunity to have the success I had at Eastern and then in turn have the opportunity to sign a professional baseball contract and put that on my resume and then be a teacher someday and a coach. So obviously everything happens for a reason. But I think D3 is where some people need to be.
I agree with you again. And I think something special about being D3, like you mentioned, like you don't get those full ride scholarships that you might see at D2 or the Division I level. You get guys that just genuinely play the game because they have love for it. You get a lot of gritty guys who maybe walked on to a D3 school and turned out to be an absolute stud. You get a lot of that. I just think something about the passion for Division III. You're not fueled by we don't get like really any NIL deals and like I said, no scholarships. It's just you want to be out there, you want to compete, you want to be a part of a team bigger than yourself without all of the outside factors that you can also fall back on that you might get at a higher level. I think something like that, it goes to show like how truly passionate the people of Division III are and like genuinely want to be there. And you also touched upon like situation and circumstance. Like a lot of guys have the talent to go Division I and end up definitely not settling, ending up at a D3 school for other reasons, whether it's academics or a money reason or just because they fell in love with the D3 school. I think the common stereotype that I kind of have seen like playing in summer ball leagues sometimes is like the the D3 guy isn't always worse than the D1 guy. And a lot of the time, the D3 guy is better than a good chunk of D1 guys. And I'll always say, I'm sure, Joe, you would agree with me. My national championship Eastern team, I'd take us against a lot of D1s. I think we would definitely have held our own in a lot of those conferences. And maybe I'm being a little biased, but I got confidence in my guys. I know we had a lot of talent, and I think that's something really special about Division III as a whole.
Yeah, of course, I agree. Like I said, Division I athletes and programs are Division I for a reason, because there's a ton of talent top to bottom. I think that might be the difference with baseball is maybe talent, 1 through 50 is a little more consistent. But there's a lot of D3 baseball players, as we know, that could probably play D1. But yeah, like you said, Jason, it's just D3 just has something, I don't know what it is, but it's just something special about it. It just makes it a little different than 1 and 2. Maybe it's just the having to work for it maybe a little harder because there's no money involved. But I think every level is special in its own way and has its own obstacles. D1 has obstacles, D3 athletes have obstacles. But I think Jason will say the same thing. We both had, or he is having, a great opportunity and a great experience at the D3 level, and I did as well, along with all my teammates 20 years ago.
Awesome. And the last question we'll wrap this up with, as I mentioned before we started recording, this is the 50th anniversary of Division III, which is kind of the basis for this podcast being created. So we've been around for 50 years, and there's obviously many more years to come. So it's a broad question, but what do you see, or what do you hope to see for the future of Division III? And Jason, I'll let you go first.
Well, one thing I never want to wane out of what makes D3 so special is, like I talked about earlier, the competitiveness. I would hate to ever see it get kind of lost in if NILs and stuff starts to become more of a mainstream thing and it gets down to the D3 level. That's great, but I never want to see people starting to sell out for money and not scholarships in the D3 level. I think it's awesome that D3 is unique in that way from D1 and D2. And there's always the opportunity with the transfer portal. If somebody wanted to eventually go and try a new level and get those benefits, then that's great. But I think part of what makes D3 so special is how it really enhances people's genuine love for the game, as there's not as many other factors maybe drawing you in, which I think it just makes it a lot more special and unique.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. If my future and vision of Division III, like Jason said, I would hate to see money start to get involved with NIL deals, and more, again, having the athletes play for the true passion and love of the game, because we all know that money can definitely get in the way and be an obstacle. But being an outsider now and someone who was involved with D3 baseball back in the day, and but still connected in a way, being a high school coach and a travel baseball coach, I'm in constant contact with college coaches. I think D3 sports, I think the future is bright. I think now, especially in the Little East Conference, there's a ton more parity. There's a lot of teams that were kind of on the bottom end of the Little East when I was playing that are now towards the upper part of the Little East Conference in baseball. So I think there's a lot more parity within Division III, which is a good thing. You see some different teams win the national championship. So that's always a good sign that there's a lot of good athletes that are spreading themselves out and going to different D3 schools. So I think the future is bright. Hopefully D3 can continue on that same path because, as I mentioned before, I think there's something to be said about D3 athletes kind of being unique and special in certain ways.
Great way to end this podcast. Thank you two both so much for joining us. It was a great conversation. I'm glad you two got to meet some national champions together here, but thank you both for joining us. Good luck this season, Jason. Good luck this season, and you're probably year-round coaching, Joe, so good luck with everything. Wishing you guys the best, and thanks again for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie, for having us. Jason, great to meet you, my man, and good luck.
Thank you. Nice to meet you as well. Hopefully I can see you at a game at some point.
I'll be there.
To everyone listening, thanks for tuning into this episode of Small Talk. We post new episodes every Thursday. To follow along with everything Division III, you can find us on social media at NCAD3 or NCADIII. Make sure to join the conversation with us all year long by using the hashtag DIII50. Have a great day, and we'll see you for some more Small Talk next week.